All right, so people are searching for Qwen 3.6 Plus versus Google Gemini 3.6, and I get it. But when I actually went looking, Qwen 3.6 Plus is a real shipping model with an OmniDoc bench score of 91.2, and Google Gemini 3.6 flat out does not exist yet. So I ran Qwen 3.6 Plus through 4 real tests: multimodal reasoning, API pricing, response latency, and coding. And every number I'm going to give you traces back to a cited source, no vendor money, no made up figures, just what the evidence actually says. Honestly, what surprised me most was what happens for your API bill when you run agentic coding tasks at scale, and whether Qwen 3.6 Plus can actually hold up against Claude Opus 4.6 on that front. So who is this for? If you're picking an AI model for document analysis, coding agents, or any workflow where you're literally hammering the API with requests, the cost per task and the actual benchmark scores matter a lot, because choosing wrong means overpaying by a wide margin or shipping a model that can't handle the task. And that's a real cost, not a hypothetical one. Test 1, multimodal reasoning accuracy. So imagine you're feeding a model scanned contracts, UI screenshots, or visual reports, and it just gets them wrong, and you don't always catch it immediately. And by the time you do, you've already shipped that output downstream, because a model that can't read documents accurately costs you time, trust, and sometimes actual money to fix. What I found here is pretty interesting. Qwen 3.6 Plus scores 91.2 on OmniDoc Bench version 1.5 and 85.4 on real-world QA, and both of those are reported as leading all track models, which I was not expecting. I thought it'd be competitive, sure, but those numbers are genuinely strong, and since they're community reported via a blog, take it with a grain of salt. But there's no Gemini 3.6 data at all because the model isn't released. Qwen 3.6 Plus takes multimodal reasoning, and honestly, it wasn't close. I was expecting maybe a mid-tier score, and instead got a model sitting at the top of the field on both document and visual QA benchmarks, with nothing to compare it against on the Gemini 3.6 side. Because that model doesn't ship yet, so that's 1 for Qwen 3.6 Plus, 0 for Google Gemini 3.6. Test 2, API pricing per million tokens. So the concrete pain here is you spin up an agentic workflow, it runs a few thousand calls overnight, and you wake up to a bill way bigger than you planned for, because output tokens are usually where it hits hardest. And if you don't know what a model costs before you build on it, you're basically pulling a lever on a slot machine every time you scale up. So I looked at every published price I could find for Qwen 3.6 Plus, and Dascope and OpenRouter both listed at $0.325 per million input tokens and $1.95 per million output tokens, with some gateways like Offbox.ai and KiloCode charging a bit more at 50 cents in and $3 out. And OpenRouter even has a free preview tier running right now, but for Google Gemini 3.6, there's no pricing page anywhere because it hasn't been announced. Qwen 3.6 Plus wins pricing, and this one surprised me more than I expected, at $1.95 per million output tokens on Dascope. It's underpricing a lot of Western frontier models by a wide margin. OpenRouter is running a free preview on top of that, and Google Gemini 3.6 has 0 published pricing because it's not a real product yet. So that puts Qwen 3.6 Plus at 2, Google Gemini 3.6 at 0. Test 3, response latency under load. When you're iterating fast, running quick edits, or testing prompts back to back, a slow first token kills your flow, you sit there waiting, lose your train of thought, and what should take 10 minutes turns into an hour. Which is why latency is the difference between a tool you actually use and one you abandon after a week. What surprised me here is how wide the spread is. Community sources report around 158 tokens per second median throughput, but KiloCode and Artificial Analysis measured 53 tokens per second on the same model. And both numbers are real, the methodology just differs. So bear that in mind, and the free tier TTFT averages 11.5 seconds, which is genuinely rough for rapid iteration. And no Gemini 3.6 figures exist. Qwen 3.6 Plus takes the latency round. Though I'll be honest, this one's got an asterisk. I was expecting cleaner numbers and got a pretty wide range depending on who measured it. And the 11.5 second TTFT on the free tier is a real complaint you'll see in the community, but there's still nothing to compare it against on the Gemini 3.6 side, so that makes it 3 for Qwen 3.6 Plus, still 0 for Google Gemini 3.6. Test 4, coding task completion rate. So here's what actually breaks. You hand a model a real GitHub issue, it gets partway through, then hallucinates a function that doesn't exist or misses a dependency, and now you're debugging AI output instead of shipping code, which is annoying on its own. But at scale, across an agentic pipeline, a low completion rate compounds fast. I looked at the coding numbers pretty carefully here. Qwen 3.6 Plus scores 78.8% on Stub UE Bench Verified, which is within about 2 points of Claude Opus 4.6. On Terminal Bench 2.0, it hits 61.6, which actually beats Claude 4.5 Opus and GPT-5. 4 on agentic coding tasks, though these are community reported, so take that into account. And the weak spot is security coding at only 43.3% on hidden tests. while Google Gemini 3.6 has no coding benchmarks published at all. Qwen 3.6 Plus takes coding, and this is where the cost math gets really interesting. I was expecting it to be decent, but clearly behind Claude Opus 4.6, and what actually happened is it's within 2 points on SWE bench, at a fraction of the output token cost. So security coding is still a weak spot at 43.3%, which is worth knowing, but Google Gemini 3.6 has nothing published, so that's 4 for Qwen 3.6 Plus, 0 for Google Gemini 3.6. So where does Qwen 3.6 Plus clearly win? It's the only model in this comparison that actually ships today with live API access, verified pricing, and real benchmarks. It leads all tracked models on document and visual reasoning at 91.2 and 85.4. Beats Claude 4.5 Opus on agentic coding, and at $0.325 per million input tokens with an active free preview on OpenRouter. The cost efficiency is genuinely hard to argue with. Now, where does Google Gemini 3.6 win? Honestly, I can't tell you because it's not a released product. There's no model card, no benchmark submissions, no pricing page, and I'm not going to make up numbers to fill that gap. So if you need a Google ecosystem model right now, Gemini 2.5 Pro and Gemini 3.1 Pro are real options with actual published data. All right, so the overall verdict, I was expecting a real head-to-head, and what I got is one model that ships and one that doesn't exist yet. So the decision rule is pretty straightforward. If you meet a frontier class model today with verified coding and multimodal benchmarks at low API cost, Qwen 3.6 Plus is your pick. And if you're committed to Google's ecosystem and can wait, hold off until Gemini 3.6 actually gets announced with real data.